Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Secrets to Plant-Based Living Summit, how to use food to have radiant health, mental clarity, and boundless energy. I'm your host, Sandra Cotto, and I've brought together 21 of the most influential doctors, athletes, coaches, authors, and chefs to help you understand what plant-based living looks like, what it can do for your health, and how you can transform your life to live more vibrantly. I'd like to welcome today's guest, Ellen Jaffe Jones. Ellen is the prolific author of 6 vegan books, including Eat Vegan on $4 a Day, Vegan for One, and Vegan Sex. She is a certified personal trainer, a nationally ranked sprinter, and has placed in 135, get that, 135 5K or longer races for her age group since 2006, just on plants. Ellen, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Sandra, so much for having me. It's a privilege to be here. And I guess I should just say over the weekend, because it's getting hot here in Florida, I'm trying to cram all these races in. And since I sent you my bio, I did 2 5Ks this weekend and got first in my age group in both of those. So I'm up to 138 now, actually.
Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. Congratulations. Well, I mean, I see all these beautiful medals, as I'm sure everyone else does too. What an amazing accomplishment. So tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got started. What are you excited about?
Well, what I'm most excited about, I'll go in reverse order.
Okay.
Just this morning, I went to our Publix grocery store, which is popular here in the Southeast, and they said they were closing at 5 o'clock. And I said, why are you closing early? I said, are you trying to keep up with Earth Fair that just opened across the street? And go, yeah, actually we are. And I said, well, you know, I have been shopping over there because they have so many vegan products. And he goes, wait just a minute. Tell me what it would take to make you shop at Publix 100% of the time. And I said, have you got an hour? And the bottom line to all this is he says, we are remodeling to attract more vegans. We recognize that this is not just a fad, that there are people like you running around. And he said, you are the ideal shopper. And so by the end of the conversation, I gave him my business card and he said, we have a whole department that is looking at this, trying to figure out what to do. We'll be in touch. And so it's like the world is changing at light speed. So that's really what I am, I think, the most excited about. But my journey began when I was 5 years old. My aunt died of breast cancer in our home. It was very traumatic. And all of my childhood was spent in hospitals with various relatives. My mom, aunt, and both sisters would go on to get breast cancer. We became part of the original breast cancer gene studies. And as a TV investigative reporter for 18 years, 2 Emmys and the National Press Club Award, my side job was trying to figure out the truth about food. So I would use any excuse I could to interview doctors or dietitians. And I ran across Dr. Neil Barnard in the late 1980s when he came to St. Louis, and he made so much sense. I thought, you know, this is worth looking into. So for many of us, the progression was macrobiotic, which is basically a vegan diet using white fish, and then vegetarian, which included dairy and eggs, of course, and then eventually morphing totally to vegan once we realized the horrors of animal abuse and also just the incredible health benefits. I started running when I was 28. I almost died of a colon blockage, and that's really when I started making some of these changes. And the doctor said they'd never seen such a large blockage in somebody so young, and I would need to be on medicine and stool softeners the rest of my life. So I ran to the health food store, read all 5 books on fiber, because that's all there was at the time, and started that progression that I mentioned. At the same time, I was trying to run, really wasn't very good at it. You know, there was no Title IX when I went to high school. Women were not encouraged to become medical professionals, healthcare professionals at all, because it involved science and math and, you know, take your home economics class. And if you wanted to exercise, well, there's extramural field hockey after school, and that was it. So it's a very different world. I got more involved in running, and I took a break when my kids were younger, but then I started running after they were out of the house and realized that at my age, I was really quite fast. And the big secret is that meat eaters typically get arthritis. And what I really started seeing in these later years now is that women who used to beat me like crazy when I was doing this 10 or 15 years ago, they aren't even running anymore. And at the two races I did this weekend, at one of them, a woman came up to me and she said, I just want you to know that there's some people who have talked to me that they think you lied to get into your age group. They don't really think you're 65. And that's been happening more and more too, those kinds of experiences.
What a nice compliment, though.
So that's sort of the short story.
Wow, that's an incredible story. So you've been vegan for how many years now?
The better part of 40 years. I had some serious interruptions when I had children. The advice at the time from doctors and healthcare professionals were that you really need to be eating dairy products and whey protein. I was actually a Leche League leader, which is the breastfeeding information and support group. And even though they focused on our own species specific milk, when you read their cookbooks, which we had in our libraries that we lended out to people, they talked about eating animal products. And so it was a very confusing time. Certainly we didn't have the information or research that we do now that says, you can be pregnant, all life stages are fine on a plant-based diet, so not a problem. So during that time, I went off of it, and it wasn't until I reintroduced a plant-based diet when the kids were younger. I was serving the veggie burgers at their school, that kind of thing. And then after really I was divorced and then had power in my own home exclusively because food was a battleground with the kids as well, that I really could take charge and go back in that direction that my heart was leading me to.
Wow, amazing. So what was it like being, back then, being a vegan to what it is today? Because I mean, just in the story that you shared with us about Publix, which I'm super excited about. And I have to say, I haven't shopped at Publix very much myself because I either go to other stores that have more of the plant-based products and vegan products. But I did notice that Publix is starting to have a lot of the cheeses, and I've seen even the plant pure meals in the frozen section. And so I was like, wow. But for you to actually speak with the manager who was so interested in wanting to know more really shows how big this movement is, in people really wanting to change their lifestyle and incorporate more whole food plant-based into their diet. So what was that like for you back then, trying to be a vegan and, and socially? Because I know sometimes even today, socially people, when you go out, they look at you differently. And how come you're eating that, and asking questions? So how was it for you?
Oh, it's so much easier now. It's so much more acceptable. When I first wrote Eat Vegan on $4 a day, we tried to get it published in 2008. And my agent that I had at the time shopped it to all the big boy publishers. And the problem was a couple of things, that I was a first-time author. And then the second part of it, the original title was Eat Well on $3 a day. So that gives you an idea of how long I was shopping it. By the time I got it published, we had to deal with inflation. $4. But the idea then was, the reason my publisher was adamant about using the word vegan was because by 2011, it was really starting to become associated with health and not just crazy animal rights activists, which, it's fine with me if they want to do that, and associate my book that way. I don't have a problem with that. But in terms of reaching broad numbers, the original thought was they wanted, my agent and others wanted it to be this backdoor vegan book like Skinny Bitch and Quantum Wellness. Those were the two popular books, New York Times bestsellers at the time. And they thought, this had the potential to be that. So, but in the real dark ages, back in the 1980s and 90s, in some ways it was almost healthier because you didn't have all these alternative foods. It was pretty much beans and rice and soups and a little bit of seitan, a little bit of tempeh, but that was pretty extreme. And the only cheeses available were soy cheeses, and those were really disgusting. So the processed foods that were out there were kind of just awful. And if you made a veggie burger, it was from scratch.
Wow. Yeah, I know there's so many more options now. What's your take on people who transition? I mean, you have people say they're vegan and they think, oh, you're vegan, you're healthy. And of course, there are a lot of processed foods that are vegan that may not be as healthy. But what do you think about those products for someone who may be transitioning or maybe exploring this type of lifestyle?
So here's the thing. Some of the experts, especially the environmental experts, are really adamant that we all should have been vegan yesterday. We and the planet, the animals don't have time for us to figure this out. So my feeling is any way we can get them there, and hopefully they will be exposed to these wonderful, beautiful colors of the rainbow types of foods in their natural states, whole foods, plant-based, and they will get there. But if they feel like they have this addiction to their ice cream or their hot dogs or sausages or whatever foods, you know, it's how do we get them to the table? And that is one of the most fun things I've ever done was teach cooking classes for Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And back in the day when we had grants, we could do 2 classes a day, 5 days a week. And I would have standing room only 60 people in a cooking class at a community center, just wanting to taste this delicious whole foods, 4 or 5 recipes that I would prepare and send them off for the week. And they were just so happy. And I saw so many reversals of conditions and reductions of medication or coming off of medication. And that was just so cool to see that kind of thing. And I think people, if they, either they come to the table for animal rights reasons or they come to the table for health reasons. The reasons I keep writing these different books that have nothing to do with each other really is so that I am reaching someone wherever they are. Because I think we have to take that approach with people that it's you get a lot more with sugar than you do with vinegar, and to kind of listen to people where they are, what are their issues, and in terms of like what I'll be offering in terms of my free gift, that's where we are with people. We have to find out what is it that interests them most, and how can we appeal, as the Publix manager said to me, how can we get you to shop at our table all the time? And that's really what we want to do here, is just find a way to reach people. And certainly the environment is as big an issue, but you know, I was talking to somebody today who said, you know, my experience with people is they don't care about their grandkids, if they even have grandkids. They don't care that the planet's not going to be there for them. They just want to eat their salmon because it tastes good.
Right. Yeah, that immediate gratification and not really thinking about what the future could hold.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And so you wrote a book, Eat Vegan on $4 a day. So what are some tips that you can give us on, you know, eating a plant-based diet on a budget? A lot of people tend to say, oh, you know, it's expensive. And so what are some tips that you can give the listeners?
Well, because I was a TV investigative and consumer reporter, I followed the consumer price index for decades before I ever wrote this book. So I knew, as some people in my audiences will volunteer, the price of beans just hasn't gone up in 30 years. And grains too, you know, again, in their whole state, in their natural states, it's very cheap. And so it involves cooking from scratch. Dry beans, of course, are incredibly cheap. And people go sometimes, well, I don't have time to cook. Well, first of all, we've got Instapots now, something we didn't have 30 years ago. So you cut your time in a third to a half. So don't give me that excuse. And then my big comeback is, if you don't have time to cook, then you don't have time for cancer, diabetes, or heart disease. Those are real time wasters. You can spend a lifetime with your relatives or yourself in a hospital or hospital surroundings dealing with the consequences of those diseases. So a couple of times a week, you can plan your menus. And I have lots of tips and ways to do that in the book, of course. But you know, it's just simple, basic, common sense kinds of things. So if you have a serving of beans, that's about $0.10 a serving. And I check prices all the time just to make sure the stuff is still accurate, which it is. So compare that to hamburger meat or beef tenderloin, which can be as much as 30 times more expensive. So it's way cheaper to cook beans from scratch. And even if you don't want to do that, buy canned beans, frozen beans, it still is ridiculously cheap compared to an equal serving of animal protein. So there's that. Look high and low. That's where the manufacturers hide things that are store brands. Manufacturers do big money for you to look at things on impulse. So that's going to be at eye level. That's where the most expensive products are. And keep track of what you're spending. And there's so many ways, you know, there's so many different apps out there now that you can just load up on your phone and keep track of this stuff. You know, scanning the products as you buy them is one way. There's some great apps to do that. And if you are really on a fixed budget, and this goes back to working with consumer counseling credit in managing people's credit card debt, keep a certain amount of cash hidden in a drawer that you are going to allocate for spending every week, every month. And when you are out of that cash, then it's time for you to get yourself invited to friends and relatives' houses for your meal. So just some quick tips there for you.
Great tips. Yeah, I love your tip about shopping in the supermarket looking high and low, right? Because of the advertisement at eye level. And so we tend to, of course, it's that impulse shopping and what you can see right there on the spot.
Right.
Yeah. And I think too, like you said, it's not as hard when you do some batch cooking, right? When you buy some grains in your beans, and you could really use those for a couple of days throughout the week and change up your meals, right? So that you're not constantly buying something new every day.
Yeah, absolutely. You can freeze them. You can also process vegetables and put them in glass containers so they're right at eye level. When you open the fridge, that's the first thing you see. So there are lots of ways you can streamline the cooking process and kind of fast track. The recipes that I wrote in that book, by the way, were written when I was a single working mom, and all I wanted to do was get food on the table in a hurry at the end of a work day for my 3 kids. So very simple, 20 minutes max on most of those. And it should be fun, simple, easy. Growing your own produce, if you can do that. I have ideas in there about different vegetables that reseed themselves from year to year, so you don't have to stress over what am I going to plant this year and is it going to die. So there are things that you can do just to keep it local, very local.
Great tips. Great tips. So out of everything that we've talked about, what would be one thing that you would like the listeners to get out of today? What would you want them to take away?
This is so much easier than you think. It really is. And it's a fun, joyous experience, especially if you can get involved with others who are doing this, either bring them into the fold. You talked about the whole social thing. There are so many great meetups in our area, and I know these are happening all over the country. Get yourself to a veg fest where you find like-minded souls for the whole day or 2 days, whatever it is. Just thousands of people. This movement is growing so fast. The Veg Fest that I speak at, sometimes they just discover at the end of a day that for next year they got to go for 2 days and rent out a whole convention center. It's just that big and that powerful. So volunteer at those events too. That's another thing you can do to get yourself involved with people who are really passionate about this, because we do need to be doing it to save the environment just as much as we do to save our health. And this is so amazing. One of the races I did this weekend where, it's after the race is over, right? I placed first in my age group. I'm dripping sweat, and I'm wearing my Eat Vegan on $4 a shirt a day.
Oh, I love it.
I wear this every race I do. And so this guy sees me and he says, "Oh, have you met the race director? She's vegan or vegetarian or something." So he calls her over and she looks at my shirt. She said, "Yeah, I'm vegetarian." She said, "I tried to go vegan, I don't know, for a couple of weeks, a couple of months." And she said, "But I've got a thyroid condition, so it just didn't work." I'm going, and she says, "I have a protein deficiency." And I just go, and my first response is, "Does it look like I have a protein deficiency? I'm 65 and I get plenty of protein." But, we just hear this so much, even with all of, the Brendan Braziers and the Robert Cheeks and everybody out there with the bodybuilders. It makes your head explode. I'm better now.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that was going to be one of my questions. Do you still get that question all the time? Where do you get your protein? And, protein, it's so overrated, right? And how it's marketed, and that you have to have, animals in order to get the protein. And there's protein in everything that we eat, right? Our nuts, our seeds, our grains like quinoa, it's a complete protein. There's so many. And like you said, there's very, very few people who would be deficient in protein. Very few.
It doesn't exist in the US. It just isn't. And I said to her, "Do you have a diagnosis?" And it's like, she's the race director. She's kind of going crazy. And she just sort of blew me off. She just didn't really have time or inclination to have that conversation in that moment. But I plan to follow up with her because she was very interested in having me be a sponsor. See, that's the thing. We're so healthy. We don't have to spend our retirement incomes on doctors and all the nonsense that these poor meat eaters are having to waste their life savings away for.
So what's your typical response when someone asks you that question that, we repeatedly get over and over? Is there an easy way that you answer that, or?
Well, because I was a television reporter, I have, do you want my 5-second answer, my 10-second answer, 30 or an hour? But beans, grains, and greens. That's also a way, by the way, to eat cheaply on a vegan diet. And there's protein in every plant out there. We are just eliminating the middleman for where other animals get their protein. And the biggest animals on the planet are vegan. And, you know, I saw a response to that. You know, the meat eaters are always coming up with their responses. And so their response is, oh, you know, because that's body fat that they have. Well, it's not. And again, you can do just fine. As if you go to veganbodybuilding.com, you'll see all those folks who are plenty muscular and they're doing it all on plants. So all in one, there they are. So you get beans, nuts, seeds, grains, and the greens for protein.
Yeah, I mean, you think about all, like you said, the strong animals, the gorillas, right? And the rhinoceros and all these animals that are so strong, and they're all on a plant-based diet. I used to get teased all the time when I would go to my kickboxing class, and you know, they knew I would always wear shirts kind of like yours saying, you know, plant-based. And they're like, wait a minute. I'm like, yeah, I'm strong and I'm working out just as hard as you and I'm doing it all on plants. So yeah, I think it's about just, you know, being that, you know, walking the walk, just, you know, showing how you can do all these things and have a lot of energy. I know when I wake up in the morning, I wake up and I'm ready to go. You know, I don't have that 3 o'clock in the afternoon slump, you know, after having this huge lunch and, you know, everyone's trying to drink their coffee to stay awake because the foods that we eat are so heavy, and especially the animal products, it takes so much for our body to digest that. Whereas when you're eating plants and all these other clean, you know, ingredients, it's so much easier for the body to digest, and you just feel so much lighter, and you don't have that, you know, 3 o'clock slump where you need that pick me up.
Yeah, and part of the feeling of lightness is that your digestive system is firing at 100%. You know, because I almost died of a colon blockage, I have really researched that whole thing. And it's just amazing how much, you know, when I wake up on race morning, my trick is just drinking 16 ounces of cold water. And, you know, I am cleaned out in 30 minutes and ready to go. And, you know, I don't know if you saw the Boston Marathon at all, but that poor girl, she had to stop about, 16 miles in and take a potty break. I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming, well, we just don't even need to go there. But, you know, I see this a lot, especially at races, before the races. You know, I've kind of, as people, it's getting closer to start time and people are stuck in the porta potties, and I'm going, y'all need a little more fiber.
Well, I think that's the better question that people should be asking. Everyone's so concerned about where do you get your protein? And I say, well, the better question is, are you getting enough fiber, right? To keep everything moving and keep everything going. So exactly. Yeah, we're so much on that protein kick. All right. And one other thing I wanted to ask you, being on plants, right, or being a plant-based eater, do you find that your recovery times are a lot quicker? Because I noticed that for me when I went plant-based 4 years ago, and I've been running for probably about 20 years or so, marathons, half marathons, and I noticed when I went plant-based that my recovery times were so much quicker. Like I was able to get back out there and run again a lot quicker than when I wasn't on plants. Do you find that to be true for yourself?
Yeah, and it's not only true for me, but I've been lucky enough now because I'm one of the few athletes out there who has written a book on vegan fitness, female athlete. And so I get asked, sometimes audience members come up to me afterwards and say, well, you're the token female. So we're, as a part of this athlete panel, what I'm hearing other people say is that yes, the recovery is amazing. And, you know, we all have little anecdotes. And just this past weekend, I told you I did 2 5Ks back to back. And, you know, I'm going all out. And I only needed 1 day of recovery in between those. And to some extent, sprinting is a lot more rigorous than, you know, just kind of lollygagging along where you can take walk breaks on a half marathon. I mean, I'm not suggesting that those are easy events by any stretch, but the sprinting events, I've seen far more injuries somebody sprinting 100 to 400 meters than I've ever seen in a marathon. And when you go all out like that, you can really overdo it. And I'm just not feeling the pain, which is wonderful. It's just so wonderful how great the recovery is. And I've heard that across the board, not only on the athlete panels that I do, but just anecdotally from people that I come across. So. Yeah.
Yes, I agree. All right, so I have one last question for you. If you were on a deserted island and you had a choice of one fruit and one vegetable, what would those be?
Well, when you first told me you were going to ask me that question, I mean, my brain didn't even hesitate for a second. Brussels sprouts and mangoes. I don't think I'd
Brussels.
put a smoothie together, but anything with mango in it, fresh mango, fresh Florida mango,
Yeah.
especially
So
fresh
delicious.
banana, died and gone to heaven. And Brussels sprouts, I mean, there's actually a gene about that. If you hate Brussels sprouts, that means you're a super taster. You got that gene, and you probably don't like bitter, bitter tasting dark green leafy vegetables. So, and we came across this in the Cancer Project cooking classes with PCRM, and the way you can neutralize that with vinegar. Actually, a little vinegar and soy sauce if you want to kind of help disguise that bitterness that the super taster genetic folks have.
Right. I love Brussels sprouts. It's funny they say that my son loves Brussels sprouts too, and he said that's what he would take with him on a deserted island. I love spinach and I love cherries. I also love grapes too, but I really love my cherries, so I think that's what I would take. Well, thank you so much for all of your insight, and I wanted to let everyone know that you are also offering an amazing free gift, which is a 30-minute vegan lifestyle fitness session with you. Can you tell us a little bit about that session that they will get?
Well, as I teased a little bit earlier before, it's about you. It's about finding out what your goals are. Are they strictly with diet? I'm not a dietitian or a doctor, so I can't do anything that specifically prescribes a plan to help you get over whatever it is you're trying to get over. I mean, that's for the doctors and the dietitians. But as a personal trainer, I can ask you for a 3-day food log and make some general recommendations based on that. So whether it's that component of what you're doing, and because we have this wonderful technology, I can help you figure out what kind of routine you might want to work on, whether it's to just simply get off the couch and start all over or reset whatever it is you're trying to accomplish with your life. Certainly we can go down the vegan avenue with that and get you started that accomplishes both your fitness goals as well as your nutrition goals.
That's a great free gift. So I'm hoping that everyone will definitely take Ellen up on that free gift to be able to have that personal one-on-one with you. So thank you for offering that. And so let me just ask you real quickly, what's your next race that you've got coming up?
Well, there's one on, I would do one this weekend, but we're going out of town. So
okay.
Father's Day is the next one. And then here in Florida, things pretty much shut down for the summer because it is just so beastly hot. But, you know, one thing that's so important to understand too is that my whole work, my life and what I've been doing with all this, it's not a flash in the pan. It's not just going out and running 100 miles and say, okay, I've got that on my bucket, it's off my bucket list. I had a great physical therapist who said to me recently, and I think some of them do amazing things with keeping the body well oiled. What kind of a relationship do you want with running? Do you want it to be a short-term relationship or a long-term relationship? I want to still be doing this at 100. And to do that, you have to finish without injury. And that's really my strength in working with people. You know, I'm not this cutesy 20 or 40-something-year-old, but I have been running for the better part of 40 years.
Right.
And I've done it without injury. So that's really, I think, what I bring to the table the most is how to accomplish your goals and get there without being a wild and crazy person. Not to say you shouldn't do the Tough Mudder or a triathlon or anything that's, you know, outside the box, but just to do it prudently.
Yeah, keep the body moving, right? Body in motion stays in motion. So yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today all the great tips that everyone has hopefully got a lot out of today. And so, Ellen, where can we find you? What's your website?
Vegcoach.com.
Okay, vegcoach.com.
Right. That's really, and of course, all over Facebook and Instagram and
yeah.
Twitter.
Okay, great.
YouTube.
Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you to the listeners. I hope that you got a lot out of today's interview with Ellen Jaffe Jones. Stay tuned for the next interviews coming up with lots more information to help you transform your life and live more vibrantly. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.